It begs the question here, Pretzels. Where on earth did you find this piece?
So I found this piece because, kind of a long story. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Uganda, and my school had a bunch of books that were donated by someone, some organization. It wasn't documented. I never found out who donated them. I think it was UNESCO, but I'm not sure. Big old pile of books, tens of thousands of books that had just been sitting on shelves for probably over 2 decades. And one of the big projects I started there was to organize these books. And I didn't really have a system of doing that. I kind of floundered around for a while. So, I just read a lot of the books I put away. And this was in the McGraw-Hill Reader from 1990 something, I think, or 1980 something. And it had a collection of essays by some big names like Virginia Woolf, Sigmund Freud, big names like that. And Rollo May had this excerpt, which is why I thought it was an essay. It's actually an excerpt from a bigger book. But so I found it there and it really stuck with me, and I wrote it down and was looking for topics to talk about on the podcast, and I thought, hey, I really like this essay. We should do that thing.
What a loopy, serendipitous path, huh?
Yeah. And here we are.
Indeed. So we just have to go to Uganda and read through books to find topics.
Yeah. What I'm saying
That's
is
what I'm
that
hearing.
we need to all
Yeah.
pack up. And
Do we all have to join the Peace Corps first, or is that
Right.
optional?
Homework assignment. Join the Peace Corps. Anyway, I was trying to think of a central question to come at this reading with, or that we could try to answer through this reading. And there's a lot of different dimensions to this. I kind of was almost at a loss as to what direction to take it. You could talk about powerlessness, you could talk about anger, but the thing that stuck out to me, the question that I wanted to present specifically for your consideration, is what emotional obligation do we have to other people in our lives? Put another way, do we owe a certain emotional response to people at all? The reason I ask it is, there's a few different examples we could talk about this, but I think especially about the last section where she talks about a man who, as she says it, if somebody knew him, he would not have committed suicide.
Knowing someone does not require you to give them any emotion. I think what threw me off about your original suggestion is you keep using the word emotion, and I don't think that's what is lacking here. I think it's acknowledgement. It's being seen.
Well, then
It's being accepted as a person, whether you like them or not, whether you care for them or not, whether you think they're valuable or not. Just knowing them is what's required. She didn't say, gee, too bad nobody liked him. Gee, too bad nobody loved him.
Well, you're right, because she even points out that, or rather, Rollo May points out that he knew patients that would go to extreme measures just to be acknowledged, just to,
They just want to be seen.
yeah. But that's emotion maybe isn't the best, whether we have to like someone or approve of them or something.
But to see them as a person, not a role, not a bit player in somebody else's play, but to be seen as a whole person is what's required.
I think it's still an interesting question to ask, do we owe that to anybody? I certainly don't do it to everybody in my life. As important as I know it is, when I'm in a hurry and someone's on the street saying, excuse me, I'm probably going to ignore them. And maybe I'm an asshole, but I think, and I won't speak for everyone here, that's what I do. But, I don't feel proud of it all the time. Sometimes I'll stop and listen to somebody if they want money, or they want, or they just want directions, or they just want to talk, or whatever it is. But for the most part, I don't really want to engage with everybody that I see, and that could probably be really damaging to, I don't know. Maybe the person I ignored didn't think of it ever again, or maybe the person I ignored, that was really devastating to them. And I guess I have no way of knowing, but am I ethically bound to acknowledge people, or whatever you want to call this? Knowing the harm it can do if I don't.
So there's a song by Harry Chapin called Sniper I wonder if anybody's familiar with it. It's not a very pleasant song in a lot of ways. It's about a guy, and it's not based on the guy who climbed the tower in Texas and started taking pot shots on campus, but it's the same kind of thing. In the song, the character goes up in a tower and starts taking pot shots at people. And at one point of the song, the shooter is saying, am I? I'm a fighter who's not made a fist. I'm a lover who's never been kissed. If I'm alive, then there's so much I've missed. How do I know I exist? And I think it's that same sense of powerlessness that Chapin's kind of getting across that Roland May talks about. And I think it's something that really is beyond most people's everyday experience, that they don't even consider it. They're not even aware that it's potentially an issue with the people who may be around them through the course of a day. It's in some sense it's fascinating. In another sense, it's terribly, terribly tragic. So when she says if somebody had known him, I think it's the same thing that Chapin is getting across in his song. If somebody had acknowledged him and seen him as a human being, it would have changed his life dramatically. It would have changed her life dramatically.
Maybe it's a problem of just the 21st century, of the way things have progressed. Putting on sort of an anthropology hat, if you have enough people together that you can't possibly know every person you pass anymore, then you have a phenomena of anonymity that doesn't happen in nature. And when you're in a tribal group of like 150 people or so, there's no anonymity. And so I think that maybe is just part. I mean, that somebody could talk about capitalism and could talk about how if society develops past a certain point, then basically this is just a psychological hazard that we all have to deal with. And I don't think it is talked about very much. I don't think we really. We talk. It's easy to understand how capitalism can lead to environmental degradation. I don't think we always talk about how it leads to psychological degradation.
I think this is not necessarily a phenomenon that's tied to capitalism. I think you'd find it in cultures around the world, in major cities, in Mexico City, Beijing, Paris. It doesn't necessarily need to be anything related to capitalism. As a matter of fact, sure enough, I think that. Again, it's kind of a surprise. People talk about New Yorkers all the time, the attitudes, the culture, the personalities. New York is, as Frank Sinatra says, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere, because it's a tough place, right? It's hard, and one of the reasons it's hard is because there are so many people around. You are just a face in the crowd so often, until you find and develop your own smaller circles. It's despite the fact that you're there with millions of other people, in a lot of ways it can be the loneliest place in the world, because when you're down walking through the streets of Manhattan, around 5 o'clock, or God help you, you're in a car trying to get from point A to point B during rush hour, or trying to get on the subway. All these faces around you, human beings are just so common you forget to even see them as human. Right?
No one looks you in the eye.
Oh my God! Got 2, possibly 3, maybe even 4 pop culture references that sprung from that.
It's been piling up over there.
I know, right?
Pop culture pile up.
It's like tuning out. I mean, I don't want to get too heavy or get into politics or even capitalism or something, because I think it's a much higher level.
It was a loaded gun. I shouldn't have gotten there.
Yeah, but for me, like people. I have certain things, like I love horror movies, and people are like, oh, how do you watch that stuff? I'm like, there's some of them that I'll watch, and I'm laughing out loud, and I'm thinking, no one else would find this funny, but I sure do. You can't care about every last thing, that happens, especially in a make-believe movie by some stupid bubble-headed bimbo that went down the wrong path where the machete guy was. That's her own fucking fault. I'm glad she's dead. I hope it's brutal, And I think that's funny. And people are like, oh, and I'm like, so you people.
And I hope it hurt too.
Yeah. I want her to scream good before she goes, Beg for your life as he hacks you to pieces.
All right. So I don't want to interrupt too much, but is he getting misogynistic?
A little.
All right.
Usually the girl wins in the end. The plain looking girl is always the one that wins. But anyway, And
that,
there's
that makes it all okay.
no,
I forgot.
actually,
No, it's okay.
I forgot
The
what
pretty
the
girls.
rules
the
are.
dumb jock gets killed first. Like the guy most equipped to beat the killer up is usually the very first one to get hacked to bits.
Let's get back to the topic.
But anyway,
Anyway.
yeah, and those same people, you'll find them guilty of doing, oh, those people begging in the streets make me sick. God, and I'm like, so you care more about the bimbo in the movie than you do about the guy who just maybe needs $1 from you or whatever, And then I'm also thought of Little Man Tate, a movie that Jodie Foster directed, and the kid was so smart by the age of like 7 or 8 or whatever. He sat around and he was depressed a lot. And one time she was asking like, what's wrong, buddy? And it wasn't, oh, they don't like me at school. It was like, oh my God, there's so many people in slavery in Africa or something. These giant highfalutin ideas that this little 8-year-old was worried about or whatever. And it's a fine line. You don't want to be this cold, unfeeling shield, but you have to have some form of that, of course. Or you'll just. And I talk to people that all the time. Like, I don't care about this. I don't care about that. But there are things they do care about. But you can't care about everything. Maybe you give it passing emotion or passing thought or whatever. I don't know. And then on one more pop culture reference, a show I love, Will and Grace, they always have a character show up, like usually the butler, and he'll say something, and it's the most heart-wrenchingly sad, horrible thing about how he lost his leg and crawled through, whatever. And Karen just always looks at him and always bursts out into laughter, because what else can you do? He just told the most, god-awful, horrible thing about how horrible his life was. And she just laughs in his face because she thought it was hilarious. It's a comedic thing, yeah, but, I don't know, how much caring do we give?
Yeah, before we get on to pop culture reference number 3, I think there's a
I
good...
think I'm done, but go on.
Okay, cool. No, you meant, yeah, I think... So I really love psychology. I read psychology when I can, and there is such a thing as...
Well, who doesn't, right?
I know, right? There is a thing called empathy exhaustion, and it is a neurological thing because it requires cognitive effort to put yourself in another person's shoes. And there's even a mathematical relationship of whether or not this person's in your in-group, whether in your out-group, and how many steps it takes for you to empathize with their experience. That affects how much effort it takes for you to empathize with them. And that the paper I read recently pointed out that is a finite resource. You do run out eventually. And there are people who are better at it than others. You can
I
get
don't
better
think
at
that's what we're talking about here, because these people, especially the people Rollo May is discussing, are not people who were being rejected or unseen by people on the subway. These were people who had no one in their entire lives who acknowledged them as human beings. So I totally get that. My ex-husband used to call this too many rats in the cage. When there's too many rats in the cage, everybody behaves badly because you just don't have the emotional bandwidth to be a good rat to everybody. Mm-hmm. That's just how that is. But, the guy on the street that hit you up for $1, whether you say yes or no or don't even look at him, I don't think it's going to matter. If everybody in his whole life has done that, it's going to matter. But most people have, those 2 or 3 people at the center of their lives who think of them as people, who see them, who validate them. The problem is the people who don't even have the 1 or 2 or the 3. And then my question is the flip side of it. Do those people have any obligation to go looking for other people who will see them? Like the girl in the crinoline evening gown who went looking for somebody to talk to?
Like a what's the term?
Self-care.
Yeah, self-care, an obligation to self-care.
Well, but it
Can we
presumes
expect that?
it presumes that they know how, right? A lot of times I think you might find that people are simply socially awkward, and it's kind of what leads to a lot of these situations. Mm-hmm. I will admit that there was a point in my life when I was alone for a month, alone, kind of cut off from family, from whatever might have passed as friends, and I was in New York and New Jersey, so I kind of feel like I know a little bit of what I'm talking about, and it got to the point where if I could hold the door open for somebody and get that kind of acknowledgement, it was a huge deal. It was a big deal. It was everything. It was some acknowledgement of acknowledgement.
Or you could slam it in their face, and get the, you son of a bitch. That'd be acknowledgement.
You're acknowledged.
And yet I was never moved to do that.
So are these people unable to go on some level to go looking for people who will acknowledge them? And if they are, then your question is really, do we have any obligation to people like that?
Yeah.
Which brings us, strangely enough, to very current subjects, because we're talking about school shooters. We're talking about
social media.
Yeah, we're talking about bullies on social media. We're talking about bombers and terrorists. Are these people who feel invisible? Are these people who feel unacknowledged?
I mean, that's almost always the profile, right? Is somebody doesn't have a lot of connections. Nobody really knew them, or like he seemed like a nice guy, meaning that they never really. I guess maybe this person never felt like they could disclose who they really are.
They didn't know anything about them.
Well, it's just
like Priscilla, right?
Yeah.
they always say that. Yeah, they're always like, does this surprise you? Oh my God, it so does. He was so quiet. He never, and just you never hear him say, "Oh God, that's all he ever talked about." One day I'm going to shoot everybody. They'll be sorry.
The kid at Parkland did. I was thinking of the kid at
was.
Parkland. Nobody paid attention. Nobody saw him. He was going through all this tragedy. He was being left more and more alone. And on some level, somebody didn't. Is it our fault that nobody acknowledged that nobody really addressed that? Can you say it? You keep looking for your responsibility, but is there? How much is it? How much of that is yours?
Yeah, that's because there is like a danger in saying that, well, because I mean, it disgusts me to even say this, but there's this argument that floats around of like, well, if people were there weren't so many bullies in school, which is just a repugnant argument, but then these things wouldn't be happening. But so I guess that's the danger of saying that we have that obligation, is that, well, it's our responsibility for this. But on the other hand, I mean, if we don't take care of a mental health epidemic, which, there's conflicting ways to look. Some people say it's getting worse. Some people say we're just learning to diagnose these things. Who knows? But regardless, it is a problem. There are many, many people with mental health issues, and I'll disclose that I have a background in therapy. I'm training to be a psychologist. And one thing that I find really interesting is that there's all these different theories of therapy and how it works. And whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or Freudian therapy or mindfulness meditation or whatever, running around a room with scream therapy, whatever you want to call it. There are some major inconsistencies between all these theories, and yet in the long run, on statistical averages, they're all about equally effective.
That's great.
And that's a huge mystery. And it's important. They're more effective.
No, it's not, because people are
placebo.
Engaging.
Yeah.
Because you're not isolated. Somebody's paying attention to you. If they're asking you to scream or asking you to tell about your dreams or, helping you figure out what your biofeedback loop is, somebody's paying attention to you. That's the common denominator.
That's just another theory, Teresa. Interestingly
Sorry.
It's maybe it's a meta theory, but it is. I mean, it's one of those kind of quirky little things.
Except if you look at cultures that don't isolate people the way that ours does.
Right. This is why I was getting, maybe capitalism was too triggering of a word, but like...
let's go for modern industrial.
Sure.
Modern industrial urban societies.
Right. In my perception, tend to have, I can't quote any whatever, but like tend to have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. That's my impression.
Yes, because more of us can fall off the deep end.
Right.
Unacknowledged. Nobody... You're not attached.
So it's important to say here, because we're talking about this. We're talking about responsibilities. You can't go out. You cannot go out and open yourself to the masses. Come and let me love you. If you were to encounter somebody who is in this dire situation, like this poor Priscilla woman, and it was your intent to be her friend, to help her. You might be opening yourself up to something that you can't handle, right? And I
Plus,
think
it
it's
would be dishonest.
well, not necessarily, not because you could even have the best of intentions. You may want to do it, but you may find that your personalities are simply incompatible, right? You're not the kinds. You're not the kinds of people who can be friends. You're not personally equipped to take on that kind of a burden. And I think it's important for the audience to understand that if you see or know somebody like this in your own life or in your own community, it does not mean that you are morally obligated to go and be their friend, nor does it mean that you're a bad person if you don't. What it does mean is that when we talk about responsibility, we need to talk about it at a societal level. I think that's what's really kind of critical here, because we're morally obligated to make sure that person does get the help from professionals who can handle this stuff, and bring these people around so they're not living these tragic, miserable lives, and they're not on the verge of cutting themselves or shooting somebody up or any of those other kind of horrific stories.
And logistically, that's tough.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard to
Especially in
go
a
up to somebody
culture
and say,
that only
"Excuse
cares
me."
about the bottom line.
Right,
And there's no payback for, there's no profit in caretaking of any
Well,
kind.
Yeah.
If you have insurance, then it's pretty
Yeah,
profitable.
not only that, let's see where the senior care homes take us in the future. Someone tells me they're going to be sucking money out of the older generations for decades to come.
Yes, but it doesn't mean that people are being cared for in them.
That's the tough thing about the profession of being a therapist, is that if what's healing to someone is that certain je ne sais quoi of like being like, I see you and we connect, how do you train for that? How do you the conceit of psychology is that it's a science, and so you can train people, anyone can then repeat it, right? Like medicine, it's replicable. But if there's just a certain I don't know what to it, then that freaks people out, because you can't train them and you can't regulate it, you can't measure it, and people don't want to get funding to that.
Well, for those of us who were trained in a practical vocation like social work, we just call it active listening. That was our main intervention with families.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, and that's I think that's very helpful, because social workers are often they're the ones where the rubber meets the road with a lot of these folks, right? They're the first outreach, the first professional outreach probably tends to happen at that level, right? Either that or a police officer, right? A police officer responds to a domestic situation of some kind. Whatever the result of that is, invariably some social workers assign case number 7,836, for the year, go and heal this family. And then the social worker goes and tries. Before they know it, they've been empathetically drained.
Compassion fatigue is a real thing amongst caregivers.
Is that because we've relegated the responsibility of compassionate and careful listening? What did you call it? Active listening, and the practice of compassion to professionals who must be paid,
That's
while the rest of us do not. I was struck by your story about opening doors in New York and having just somebody look at you to be meaningful. And I brought that back to your story earlier about how sometimes you just can't even. You just can't. Somebody wants your attention and you just can't even. But you don't have to fix them. Sometimes all you have to do is look them in the eye and say, "Not today. Have a good one," and keep moving.
Sure.
We don't have to, and part of that is because we don't know where the lines are. You suggested somebody would be, overwhelmed by trying to be Priscilla's friend.
Potentially overwhelmed.
Right. But sometimes just looking at someone and saying, "I see you. I can't be friends, but I see you and I see your pain."
Yeah. And
They another pop culture reference. They had that on Scrubs. The main guy, Zach Braff, and his mentor that was always nasty, mean to him, but really cared. And he was like, "Well, how do you do this?" He's like, "Why? We keep losing people." Or one time, Brendan Fraser was on, and they all loved him, and of course, he died by the end of the episode. And he's like, "If you care about all of them, too much, you're going to be paralyzed. You're not going to be able to do this. Children will die from cancer, or that, whatever. You have to tune out at some point,
Yeah. Anybody who's worked in healthcare or social services or as a therapist will tell
Again,
you.
we're talking about professionals. Priscilla didn't need a professional. Well, she
Well-
needed two things. She needed to be able to be angry at people who were mistreating her. She needed to have enough self-esteem to do that. But she needed to be seen by people and acknowledged by people in order to develop that. Or are we talking about someone who is so broken that even that won't help?
I mean,
Well,
I think
so I think it's important to remember. I mean, there were people in her life who continued the trend to treat her badly. Now, Dr. May kind of talks about it as if had she the gumption, she might have been able to change that dynamic of it. But I don't think he's blaming her for it. So like he talks about when she was a younger girl and playing football with this boy who used to knock her down all the time. Clearly he didn't care about her, right? It was probably amusing to him to continue to abuse this girl. And in fact, kind of further on, he talks about other relationships she had, personal relationships in her life that were physically or sexually abusive. Probably in his eyes, perhaps she didn't even realize it so much in hers. All of those people had that, in my opinion, had that moral obligation, because when you choose to act, when you take on that responsibility, and I'm starting to think that maybe we could even call it a sacred responsibility, to be there for somebody, to be somebody, and to actively listen. It could have changed her life. If you choose to engage, if you choose to pick up that burden, then you've assumed that responsibility. Now there may come a point. Ideally, there'll come a point when it's no longer a burden, right? When it's a sincere, true friendship. May not happen.
Well, I think it's important to point out too. These are really hyperbolic cases. You know, people who are in deep psychosis and have attempted suicide or are homeless. Or these are pretty extreme situations. Your story about being acknowledged and opening the door is maybe a more pertinent example, right? Because obviously this isn't something just people in depression and in psychosis need. It's something that all of us need.
Right. To be clear, Mike is not homeless and not in desperate situation, as far as we know.
Yeah, for our listeners.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
That wasn't always true.
But there was a train of thought earlier. I kind of wanted to
You
jump
screwed
on
it
this.
up, Tins.
Oh, did I derail the old train?
It's been no, Teresa. You said, I'm sorry. T.
It's okay.
T. You said something that no.
T is
He's
T.
T. So who's
I'm me.
you're okay? You're okay. Teresa.
She's very unoriginal in her pseudonym.
Teresa, also known as Teresa.
She doesn't get the whole pseudonym thing.
She even spells it the same way. You know?
It's spelled differently. That's how it's.
No, my pseudonym is Teresa with an H.
Clever.
Yeah,
very
Emphasis
clever.
on the Teresa.
You were saying.
I was saying, we made it was something about how referring people to professionals. I guess that's how we've sort of relegated those roles of compassion to people who are arguably like professional carers, people who care for a living. It's not really what we do, but I mean, I think that's kind of what modern civilization does. It to the point where you so specialize sometimes, like, just to get anywhere in medicine these days, you have to specialize in some specialty of a larger field of medicine. You can't, general practitioners are just catchers at this point. They just refer people out. So I think that is the trend in modern society, is that we relegate roles to the quote-unquote professionals who eventually end up burned out, or people fall through the cracks or what have you. And on the one hand, like, I could definitely see how you could argue it doesn't take that much to just acknowledge someone. I guess even to be present with them I really like mindfulness. I kind of like that language of just being present with someone. But I don't know. Are you obligated to do that?
Yes, you are, because if we all did it, you professionals wouldn't be so damn burned out.
I mean, maybe.
If we all did it, there would be less. There would still be those cases that were so extreme that some help would be needed. But the fact that so many people are falling into that crack of being unacknowledged, and there are relatively few of you professionals, and I'll lump all the professionals in there together.
Right.
If we were all doing some, you wouldn't have to do so much.
But that's
Well,
also
I'm not-
true of like people who clean up garbage, right? Or people who
Exactly.
fix our cars or whatever. We all just
We're
do
coming
better care
back
of our
around to the
cars.
whole personal responsibility thing, just like always. Yes, it's we're each of us responsible, a little bit all the time.
So it's worth saying that somebody who tends toward introversion, what you're saying sounds like a horror movie to me.
Yeah.
Truly, and it's important to realize that, right? Not everybody's cut out for that kind of thing.
I have suggested nothing, except that you look somebody in the eye when they ask you for something and say no, thank you, instead of ignoring them completely.
What if
If
that's
you're-
too much? Though?
If
Yeah,
that's
I
too
don't-
much,
I don't think you
then
understand
you
social anxiety.
if that's too much, then then I would lump you in with the people who need the professional help.
Oh, not true at all. No, not true at all. That's going too far.
Okay,
We're
then
gonna,
I would
we're
then I
gonna
would
hammer
say
everybody into this little mold. Where,
I would
where you
say
somewhat
Mr.
extroverted.
Introvert, I have seen you smile at people and say no thank you, so I know that you can do it.
It was completely false. There was no sincerity behind it at all.
Why am I'm getting this picture of our poor example, Patricia, like, that guy trying to help her, and then, didn't she have some sort of breakthrough or something where she got angry or something all of a sudden?
Some other
He-
doctor
he's-
treated her and
hope
she
so.
went off the
Okay.
deep end.
I was gonna say, yeah, and then, so now she has repressed anger, and I can just hear him going, "It's quite a breakthrough, but repressed anger is not really my thing." I think maybe Dr.
Maybe
Smith
for
is,
you.
Talk to some other specialist.
Yeah,
It
I
almost
do
gets to that point.
anxiety. I don't do repressed anger. That's
In
The
therapy,
other,
it really
the other
does.
really interesting thing in this essay was his pointing out that people who don't have the ability to be angry when they need to be angry will end up being mad in the end. And that's something my grandmother used to say. If you,
What do you mean when you say mad?
I think she means
Mad isn't
insane,
crazy.
right?
Yes, mad
Yes,
isn't crazy.
not just
But that's, I'm
mad.
using the two words that he did. And my grandmother used to say, it can come out now and be unpleasant, or it come out later and be really, really ugly.
Oh,
Oh,
Your
right.
hand.
pounding the table is
Sorry.
it's destroying the ears of our
I'm
producer.
sorry.
She's Italian. What do you expect?
Yes, for those of you not able to see this, she speaks with her hands quite a bit.
But I thought that was really interesting because the other part of this equation, especially for Priscilla, was not just being unacknowledged, but was being unable, because she was unacknowledged, being unable to express anger when it was appropriate, when it would have set boundaries for her, that would have stopped her from being, that would have kept her from being abused by people who were willing to do that. So I think that's the flip side of it, is that when we don't, each of us in society, acknowledge each other, we're creating larger problems. Not just people who feel invisible and disconnected and might kill themselves, but people who will take it out against all of us for not doing it when we had the chance. It's that helpless rage that he's talking about that we pay for. It's that destructiveness. It's that the disconnection has a ripple effect throughout society. And we'll pay, if we don't pay in now, we pay for later. The professionals do, because it just takes that much more therapy. And society does, because there's just that much more destruction. So I'm back to arguing for personal responsibility, even when it's difficult, Mr. Introvert.
Oh my God, did you just say personal responsibility?
Again.
Oh my God, what are you, a conservative Republican or something? Jeez.
Those fighting words.
Someone I know would love you right now, but you hate him, so.
How is personal responsibility
A conservative ideal.
a
Oh my God, that's all
politically
they ever talk about. It's your fault you're poor. Pull
No,
yourself up
she-
by your bootstraps.
All right, so that's I don't think that's what you.
No.
No, but I mean,
No.
just,
I'm talking personal responsibility to be generous and compassionate. That's why you're confused. I'm not talking.
yeah,
I'm not.
they wouldn't get that at all. In fact, that's the opposite.
Well, sad to say, T, neither did you.
No, I'm talking about the obligation, the responsibility that we have to be more giving than we are in a society that makes it really difficult to be giving because there are too many damn rats in the cage all the time.
So it's funny you're saying. If I want to restate this properly, personal responsibility to be more open and caring or whatever, that kind of thing.
Humane and compassionate.
Okay, which is the exact opposite definition, and I'm not saying we're not going to talk politics, of what they use it for. You know, they say personal responsibility, to care about yourself and your own stuff, and, you know, I think that's how it's used in politics.
There's no Republicans in the room that I'm aware of to defend themselves, so I think what conservatives might say is that, one argument would be that the church used to fill this position and that it doesn't in society. And the argument that I hear most from conservatives is that exactly, that, you know, the message of Jesus and all that, love each other, and that we wouldn't have a need for mental health.
I've got a friend in Jesus.
Whereas, like, the liberal approach to problems tends to be to institutionalize and to say, let's put this on a societal level, let's make it a societal responsibility, right? And that tends to be the liberal approach to things.
The societal responsibility exists, and the institutions are necessary for the people who are not just casually affected by the modern industrial lifestyle. There are people who are sick; they need to be cared for.
So
Yeah, there's more going on with Priscilla than just loneliness too.
you know, it's really worthwhile saying at this point that you know, my I don't know what you want to call it, my inability to connect with people went on for a very long part of my life, and until graduate school, when I really was able to kind of find people with whom I could connect and have discussions, ironically a lot like this one right here. And what I found was we all had backgrounds that were not very dissimilar. I mean, certainly specific points were different and sometimes radically different, but there was a common core. And when I came to Louisville, and I had this idea about starting the group, I told people, I said, I really miss talking about philosophy, but I really miss talking about it people with whom I could connect. And this group really did that for me. It really kind of created the community. So if there is a personal responsibility, I feel like, I fulfilled it. But not only that, but we all continue to fulfill it for ourselves and for one another. Every now and then, we talk about, kind of maybe we've had enough. I need to call a halt to this stuff. And I think, kind of, if we'd stopped it 2 years ago, who would we not know now? Whom we really, really enjoy and really like, kind of having come around and having been part of the group. People who really add to our lives and fulfill this critical need that we have for one another.
I have more friends in Louisville because of this group than I do from college.
Yeah.
And you were referring in the past to when you were lieutenant of that white power group, right? Of course. That you miss every day. Yes.
Community.
So, and that's been the struggle. I mean, because there's some times when it's just hard to go, right? It's hard to go to the meeting. It's hard to go to the group, but there are some real gems in there, and it's really paid off. It's paid off personally, and I think it's been reciprocated many times.
Group hug.
So basically, what you're saying is you're full of shit for saying you can't. Being an introvert, you can't do what I've just suggested. When the truth is, you've been doing it at least once a week for as long as I've known you.
But again, I mean, you need to. Understand. What I said before was you need to understand that kind of what you're saying is horrific to introverts, and for as introverted as I might have been, I'm nowhere near kind of I'm probably not even in the second quartile or third, certainly not in the third quartile. I'm sorry, not quartile. Standard deviation. For people who are really introverted, and to put that kind of burden on those people is really asking a lot.
I don't think it's asking too much to be civil. I don't think it's asking too much to be compassionate when you can, and to at least be civil when you can't be compassionate.
As a fellow introvert, I am often pretty done at the end of a day of counseling, and to the point that I don't even want to talk. And you can't look somebody
in the eye and say thank you, no thank you?
Sometimes, I mean, it might be a very vacant, very automatic,
Fine.
That's not what I'm sensing that we were talking about. What I was sensing about is real acknowledgement.
But you spent your whole day doing more. You spent your whole day doing more. So if all you can do is perfunctory at the end of the day, then that's okay. But it's not okay to be dismissive. Perfunctory is fine. Civility. All I'm asking for is basic civility.
But see, this is also the danger. The danger is that believe it or not, I think introverted people are really clued in to reading body language in a way that extroverts just don't get. They just don't understand. And if you come across as perfunctory, they're going to pick up on it, and it potentially is just going to make matters worse. Right? It's like it's like being acknowledged by a robot, right? This person is giving you this words, but there's nothing behind it, and you know there's nothing behind it. It just reinforces.
It is still better than being completely ignored.
I don't think that's true. I don't think what other folks think? What do you think, Tins?
Would you describe yourself as an introvert or an extrovert?
I try to be as extroverted as I can.
You're an extroverted introvert.
Yeah. There's introvert. I mean, I don't know. You talk about being. It's funny. I've read where smile at people and say hi and stuff. But I get this New York sensibility about me that I want to look at the ground and not look at anybody and I'll see people nod or wave and I'm like, I don't know you. Why is that guy nodding at me? I've kind of learned that's just what people do. Especially like you're walking down the hall and you don't know this person and maybe you're staring and you don't even mean to be, and then eventually they will always nod at you or go, "What's up?" or and you're just like, "What the fuck's that about? Why do I have to?" And it doesn't just happen in your office; it happens out in the world.
And
all you have to do is say good morning and keep moving.
It causes me no end of anxiety. No, because I also have like kind of a big city mindset. I don't talk. I'm in a hurry. I don't talk to everybody. You can't possibly greet every person you pass. So people in my neighborhood sometimes will. I'll just be walking by. And they'll be like, morning, like, I'm here. And I walk by them, but I thought we weren't doing that. I thought this is a big city and we're not supposed to.
It's like that Seinfeld where he doesn't want to hug people. so funny enough, another New York story. I remember walking down the street in New York once and, kind of waiting to cross the street and, I'm moving in with a little pack of people, making my way from one curb to the other across the street. And this big white panel truck kind of rumbling down and kind of divides us in a very rude manner. And I said something like, almost under my breath, son of a bitch or bastard or something like that. And the guy next to me, I remember he was Indian or Pakistani kind of, and he said, nobody cares. And we had that moment of acknowledgement. And I said something to him. I said something. I don't remember what I said, but I said something that I thought was maybe a little clever, maybe a little like, a little smile about, kind of this is the world we live in. And the look on his face showed me that I had gone too far.
Yes.
It was completely, it was like, like I had grown another head. This look he gave me, look of horror and almost anger at me prompting a sincere reaction from him when I had no right at all to do that.
And this is the other side of it, is that... Now, obviously, when we're rejected in a social advance like that, most of us, don't fall apart, we go on. But especially for introverts, we do have to protect ourselves from that, right? I mean, it's not that rejection is going to like destroy your world or anything, but it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to reach out and say, "Hi, how are you?" and someone just like turns the other way and gets on their phone.
Right.
And we protect ourselves from that.
Look what you're risking.
That's a concern, right? Every time I come in the morning in the break room, sometimes the Fox TV is turned all the way up.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, and I will crank it down, and I'll turn it down, and I'm like, oh, just keep going. No one's around. Turn it all the way to mute, And there was this girl in there, and I assume, for reasons I won't go into, that she would be with me on that. And I said, really, though? All the way up? And I kind of looked at her, and she didn't say a word. I was like, you bitch. Why didn't she acknowledge that I said something? Or, I was like, did she hear me? And you want to say, what I said was...
You guys are all responding in anger for not being responded to when we've just discussed the fact that we live in a culture that trains us not to respond. It's going to require putting up with that discomfort. It's required of you as a good citizen to put up with that no, I can't use citizen here. That's a different conversation. As a decent human being... to put up with that discomfort. Because if people don't decide to be decent human beings...
Are you saying we should all be salesmen?
No. I'm saying I'm an introvert too. I understand how this is.
Teresa, you're telling people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
No, I am
not.
You
want to hear something funny?
No, I am not. I don't want you to do anything but be civil, which used to be the lingua franca of society. It used to be the basic the most basic
Lingua Wada.
requirement of being a member of any society. Basic civility,
No,
good manners.
Your
Yeah.
You want to hear something
inability to
funny?
understand that you really are starting to go down the conservative point of view. I think is very revelatory. And I think you need to consider what we're saying.
I do consider it.
No,
I'm
you're not.
asking you to be uncomfortable. I'm asking you to do a little bit
Pull
more
yourself
than
up by your own bootstraps.
I do
All right.
daily.
No.
I'm
That's
here
what you.
to-
That's
I'm
what
here
you are
tonight.
saying. That's what you are saying to people.
I am here tonight.
are saying,
I
pull
drove
yourself-
somewhere else to meet a stranger,
You have nowhere.
and I
you have
didn't know where
nobody
I
to
was
blame
going,
for
and I
your
had to get on the
situation.
freeway, and then I had to come here, and I'm going to be here for several hours, and then I have to go home in the dark.
You have
I am
nobody to blame
putting-
for your situation but yourself.
Okay, I made that choice. I'm doing this for
Well, that's the message
the
you're
group.
giving. That's the message you're giving.
What?
Yeah, and I mean, I could say what counts as basic civility is going to be pretty. I come from a small town, and I found it exhausting to make idle chit chat with people I don't know.
I
about
didn't
stuff
say
don't care
chit-chat.
about.
I
So that's what
didn't
I'm saying.
say chit-chat.
You didn't say that, but where does that end? Where do you draw that? What is basic civility? Is
You
it
you
hello?
draw
Is
the
it, hi,
line.
how's your
You
day?
draw the
Is
line
it-
where you need to, but you can't be churlish.
Well, so then what that reveals is that it is a spectrum, right? Of where it could come down to just eye contact and I look away. That's probably the bare minimum. Or it could go all the way up to, how's your day? And what have you been up to? All this stuff that I just don't have energy for sometimes, or that I don't want to open myself up to that kind
Then
of.
none of us have energy, and none of us open up, and we just get farther and farther away from each other.
And that's modern civilization. Next time on.
Just a little personal on here. Funny thing, I started coming. I was probably being super introverted and was getting divorced, and I said, "Gosh darn it, I'm going to go on meetups and start going to stuff." And I found the philosophy group and other groups. And one of the I can't remember which was the very first person I started talking to, but it was either this one person or it was you, because I kept seeing you at the meetups, and I thought she has a friendly looking face, and she doesn't sound completely stupid. And it was either you or this other person that I first started talking to, and you were receptive, because you could, because here's a big chance you could say, and turn away, and you didn't. So there's that.
The whole point of going to a meetup is to be social. As difficult as it was to go, I understood what the role I had to play when I got there.
Right.
It's the deal you make
But
when you go
remember,
out into the world.
remember some of the early ones, they weren't social. It was like, listen to the speaker, go the hell home, and they actually scheduled one where it was just no speaker, let's talk, and my life's been different ever since. But yeah, we had to go out of our way after, to mull around before the speaker or after the speaker. So yeah. But
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Anyway, some of them aren't that great, so you don't go because people don't go out of their way to do that sort of thing.
I mean, I do feel like this is basically prescribing emotions, that you can say that you don't have to feel a certain way, but if I'm having a real shit day and I just have to I can't show my real emotional state to someone if they're making small talk, or maybe that's a form of acknowledgement.
No one
but-
asked you to give anybody any emotions.
Yeah, yes, you are though.
No, no,
so I
there
can
is
say
there is
fuck
no
off, leave me
emotion.
alone, I don't
There
wanna
doesn't
talk
have to
you.
be any emotion at all in civility.
Boy,
Somebody
that
somebody
just
says good
sounds-
morning to you on the
What-
street, you say good morning back.
But again,
We're
kind
so
of
far from where we start. Is that going to cure mental illness? Is that gonna,
no. So again, kind of.
it's not what we're.
So, to Teresa's defense, kind of, as you said, kind of, Priscilla is really the extreme situation. What we're really talking about here is more practical. And what Teresa's talking about is certainly a practical approach to this. My concern, and perhaps yours as well, is that a nominal acknowledgement that lacks sincerity will be realized as lacking sincerity and can do more damage than good.
I disagree.
Okay.
Because good morning really is just good morning. It's not good morning, I hate you. It's not good morning, I love you.
Sure.
It's
Before
not
you
good
know it-
morning. It's just good
Before
morning.
you know it, it's look at the pictures of the kid. Right today it's good morning. Tomorrow you'll look at it. They're pulling out the wallet and they're showing you. Kind of we got a puppy yesterday.
Yeah, it's like
Then you're in for the long haul, brother.
Watch The Bachelor
how you
last
doing
night.
today? Well, actually, the cancer's back, and my mom. Yeah, that's great, And then they walk off. They don't give a shit how you are. It's
Then
just the thing we say to
don't
people.
ask, how are you? Just say good morning.
It isn't that funny.
Think
That's,
about what you're saying. If you don't want to engage, don't ask a question. Just acknowledge somebody else's existence.
not
that's
everyone
but
picks
that's
up
the
on those
pleasantry,
cues.
right? The pleasantry is, how are you doing?
No, the pleasantry is good morning. I wish you a good morning. I'm not asking anything from you. I'm giving you that
I
wish.
understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is kind of the typical one. You see somebody, hey, how you doing? That is a very typical, very socially acceptable thing to do.
Right,
Now,
but it's not necessarily the
again,
right thing.
kind of, let me finish. Kind of what's fascinating about this is that if we look at people in other cultures, we've had people even in our own group kind of mention this, is that when an American asks you how are you doing, what's the last thing they want to hear?
How you're doing.
How you're doing, right? It is
meaningless.
It is. And what do the people say when they come to find out it's meaningless? What do they say? They're kind of hurt because it lacks sincerity.
So don't be insincere. Just say fucking good morning.
We're going in circles here because that is so
That's-
insincere if I don't
No.
care, and that's
It-
what
you-
Mike and I are getting at.
You
is
don't
that I would
care.
rather,
You don't care enough to wish someone a good day and keep moving.
I don't care enough to always sincerely engage with someone and really connect,
It's-
which is what you're saying. Is what you
No.
were saying earlier.
All I asked you to do was wish them a good morning. You don't have to ask them how they are. You don't have to look at
So
pictures
what
of the
you're
puppy.
saying, Teresa, is that I can insincerely tell someone I wish you a good morning when maybe I have no such emotion at all.
You're really that much of an asshole?
Some days.
It's not an asshole. It's
I'm
just,
with him. Yeah.
It's
Someday.
not
That
an
kind of
asshole.
Then you
It's
need
that
to
kind of
examine that
judgment.
about yourself.
It's
No,
just blank.
Yes, you do.
Right?
That
It's,
kind of
it's,
judgment
it's
is what I'm
not it's
talking
not it's not looking at somebody and thinking less of it. It's just blank. There's just nothing there.
Then this is the world we live in, and there will be more and more Priscillas, and you will end up being a Priscilla.
Well, hold me to it, I guess. I highly doubt that.
I'll buy him
I
a
don't
dress.
know
Who's going to get him a wig?
I've got a few I could go through.
So it turns out that the name Pretzels is open now because he's Priscilla.
The science disagrees with you, by the way. The science disagrees with you. You cannot empathize
Thank
with every person you
God.
connect with.
I'm not asking you to empathize. I'm asking you to
Alright,
be
okay,
civil.
okay. Then what you're saying is you value interactions with people, which Mike and I are saying I'd rather not.
I value civility.
I would rather have no interaction at all with somebody than an insincere moment of chit chat. I find that more draining. As
I
an
haven't
introvert.
asked you to do
And-
chit chat.
And the other
We're
side,
going circle, yeah.
and the other side of the coin is, what do you want, right? What do you want from somebody? What do I want from somebody? Because I don't want insincerity. I don't want an insincere pleasantry. I definitely don't.
It's funny, on the long, lonely road back home, sometimes there's this guy that you always see, and I get the sense, and this is probably unfair, that there's, the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top, but it could just be that I'm not used to his, but he has this vest on that reflects light, so you always catch him, and every car that passes, the hand goes up. Sorry, people can't see. The hand goes up. He waves constantly, and I've gotten to where I wave back now. I'm just like, they're all.
So, but some of that is, and perhaps this is also part of Teresa's point. Some of that is Southern culture, right? I'm in the South, kind of the
Civil culture.
but
Re-
but it is
it's
more
part of a civil society.
apparent. I believe.
It's country culture.
Thank you. Yeah, it's more apparent in kind of in rural situations than you necessarily find in urban populations. Perhaps that goes back to what we talked about before about you see a squirrel once a year. It's, oh, look, a squirrel. You see dozens of them every day. You don't care about them at all. You never see any of them, right? It's the same with people. You see billions of people every day. You don't see anybody.
Right, it has to do with the closeness of people and how many people are in your area. Because, you can pretty much, if you're up in New York City and all that stuff, they're mean, they don't talk to you, don't. And then you go further south and they're nicer and they're like, well, how you doing? And they might care. But then, like in Atlanta, they're probably acting more like New Yorkers nowadays because there's so damn many people in Atlanta now. As as the population grows in the south, they'll probably get just as mean as the north eventually. It might take 100 years. I doubt that the north will get nicer, but
They're
think,
probably there. Yeah, Memphis is not a super friendly place. in
Okay,
certain
you
parts.
guys. So the next time you smile at somebody just accidentally because you're in a great mood and they give you the death look, you don't get to feel anything. Because you said that was okay.
yay!
You said that was okay. And the next time, you want to talk to somebody and they cut you dead, you don't get to feel anything because you said that was okay.
No, what you feel is maybe a little sense of compassion, right? Maybe they're going through something.
Or I just don't engage at all because I don't want to take that risk, so I just go on about my day. Cause
I think that's
they have their
cowardly
business.
on top of being uncivil. And I think the fact that we have become a cowardly society, an emotionally cowardly society, has a lot to do with where we are.
Oh my God, there's
As a
our
group.
topic. Are we an emotionally cowardly society?
So I don't know.
As someone
I-
who talks down people in suicide, I don't agree with you, but I don't think I'm cowardly. I think I just don't have it in me some days. And maybe you just don't get that because you're not really an introvert.
I'd like to invoke the rule of not trying to change anybody else's mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So can they come to you like and say, John, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. We got 3, and you're just like, yeah, I'm just not feeling it today.
No, that's my job.
Okay. Okay, I was like,
No,
we lost 3 people that
that is
day
my
when
job.
John wasn't feeling it. Okay, I just wondered.
So but that's one of the ironic things, isn't it? I mean, because I suspect, and speaking for Johnny P here, Johnny
Pretzels, yes,
uh,
pretzels.
that
Get
that
him
he
posted.
feels very deep professional ethic to help people, and that can be at odds with personal, but sometimes you really have to step up because of the professional ethic.
That's
And
a
I
character
certainly
flaw in him that we've learned to tolerate
And
I mean,
exploit.
and yes, absolutely.
But I will tell you that there are certain times when you're just not feeling it as a counselor, and you're just going through the motions, and whether your clients can acknowledge it or not, they feel it. And
Do you need a
they
hug?
know.
I gotta tell you that sucks because I think about that, you know,
Yeah.
or just a general practitioner or whatever. Oh God, if I have to listen to one fucking kid with the flu again, you know, but they have to, you know, wipe that smile on their face and be like, well, you know. Now I've had that same situation because I care deeply and I work in it's kind of the same thing as you. No, I don't. But people, you'd be like, motherfucker, son of a bitch. The phone ring, oh, great, here we go. And then sometimes you'd get some wacky woman with an accent and just wanted to make jokes and stuff. And sometimes it would turn your day. And, and I found that, and I'm not saying this is a therapy session or whatever, but sometimes I'll come to work, big cloud over my head, and then I'll see somebody, and I'll talk to them, and we'll have a little laugh or whatever. And then the cloud goes away. I'm saying sometimes that what you want to do is stay the fuck away from people and not talk to anybody. But what you probably need to do is do the opposite of that.
Sure. And I guess, what I'm getting at is take it for granted that I do always do my job. I mean, with a few exceptions. But there is a qualitative difference of when my heart's in it, when I have the energy to engage someone and ask, well, tell me more about that, and get more in-depth stuff that might not even make it into the clinical notes. But and it does make a difference. I mean, I've talked with people who have said, "Oh my God, like I feel so much better having talked to you," and no one's ever said those things like that to me. Thank you so much for listening to me. And it's like 15 minutes on the phone. But yeah, I struggle with, because I think the conceit in our society is that is an unlimited resource and you can always choose to do it. And the science says that's not true, and personally I feel like that's not true. So if that's the case, then I guess it becomes a much more complicated question of, I mean, self-care becomes a part of it, where like I need to, and for me, for introverts especially, what that means is sometimes I need to just withdraw into my little shell and just not engage for a while, whether it's positive or negative. I can't have positive interactions all, even if my interactions were guaranteed to be positive all day, I would still be exhausted by the end of it.
Well, the opposite I found was true too. Like sometimes I'd be this close to just smacking somebody or whatever, and I'd get on the phone, and maybe I would give that, without knowing, I would give that vibe off, and the person on the phone would smart off to me some more, and then then I'd find myself in the office, they said that you were kind of rude or whatever,
Yeah.
But
Yep.
yeah.
So this was certainly a pretty lively discussion. Has anybody got any summation thoughts?
So we'll go around the table with closing thoughts.
Well,
That's pretty presumptuous.
yeah, we never knew Teresa was really a conservative Republican. We did not know that. A kindred spirit with someone I won't name. Oh, if you could see the look she's shooting me right now, people. If looks could kill, I would probably explode.
It was a good discussion. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
It was certainly more personal than I thought it would be.
And it goes to show you never know how, despite how crappy the topic might sound when we start out, how it develops into something, less crappy.
Yeah, shoot for the moon, Tins.
Yeah. You mean tea.
Tea. Yeah.